Hi, it's Vicky from So Fabulous Fabrics. Let me show you the project we will be making today. This is the 3-star table runner. This is using 2 different blocks that I've designed. So they're patchwork blocks, and in the centre of the second block is a small piece of foundation paper piecing. But as you can see, the 2 outside blocks are the same. So that's what we're going to be making. So let's get sewing. The first block I'm going to start with is the Flying Geese block. So I have all my fabrics laid out here, so they've all been cut to size according to the pattern, and I've labelled them so I know which piece I'm using at any one time. So we're going to start first of all with doing the Flying Geese. Starting with the Flying Geese block, we're going to be making four at a time. So I have got 1 of A4 and 3 of B4. Now you can draw the lines across the back of B4 ready for when you're going to be stitching, but I'm going to be doing mine as I go along. So taking 2 of the B4 pieces, lay them one opposite each other into the corners, and then using my friction pen I'm going to draw a line from this corner to this corner. Now I'm going to go to my sewing machine and I'm going to stitch 1/4 inch either side of that drawn line. Once you have stitched your 2 squares on, you'll need to cut in between the sewn lines. So I'll just take my rotary cutter and my ruler. Then you need to press the wings open, and next we are going to put another one of the B4 squares on the top of these. As you can see, I've drawn the lines on these 2 already. So we're going to pop that one on there, and I'm just going to pop a couple of pins in just to keep it steady whilst I sew it. And one on that one. And then we're going to sew a scant 1/4 inch either side of the drawn line. And once we've done that, we will again cut up the drawn line, so as then we have got 4 altogether of the Flying Geese units. I've prepped the other 4 Flying Geese units with the white ones sewn on the top, 2 on each, and then I've got 2 more of the B4 squares ready to stitch on once I have cut in between the sewn lines. We now need to cut these 2 in half along the drawn line. First of all, I'm going to trim the top edge of the Flying Geese. So I want to measure 1/4 inch for a seam allowance from this point to where the finished edge is going to be at the top. So just using my ruler, I'll find a 1/4 inch mark on here, and I'm going to place that little point there into the point of where the two wings meet. And then I'm going to trim that top part away. And then moving it round so as it's on the opposite side, I can use this edge as the height of the flying geese. So I'm going to put my ruler where the height will be. So that's according to the measurement on the pattern. And then I can trim this edge away. And again, you could use, if you put one of these points into the corner here, that will help you get it straight as well for when you're trimming the bottom part off. So we've trimmed the top and the bottom, and now we need to do the two sides. So again, on your ruler, you'll need to find the halfway point that is the finished width of your flying geese unit. And then again, I'm going to put the little point that is here into that middle so as I can trim the right hand side. Just line up your top and bottom edge as well, so you know you've got it straight, and then just trim that end, then swizz it around and do exactly the same. And then you've got 3 sides that you can line up so as you know it's accurately cut. And then we'll trim that side. And then you have your flying geese unit ready to be sewn together with all the rest. Next, we're going to make the diamond inner square units. So you will need 1 of B1 and 4 of A1 for each of the units. So there's 4 in total that we're going to make. So first of all, you're going to put right sides together with one of your B1 and your A1, and you're going to stitch diagonally across. Now I have drawn a line across all of my A1s to enable me to do this, and also I have stitched slightly shy of the line, so that's on the side that's closest to the corner of your unit. Now the reason for doing that is that once you press it open like that, then you should get a neater fold and a neater where the lines match together in the 2 corners. And then what we'll do is just unfold the top piece and just trim the excess fabric off, leaving approximately 1/4 inch allowance. And just fold that open, and then we'll be ready to pop the next one on, which I'm going to pop onto the right hand side of this little unit. So this is the next one, and as you can see, I have stitched diagonally across. This one has got the excess fabric cut off first, so we will just press that piece open. So just pull it over and you'll feel it where the fold line needs to go by the stitches. And again, just press that down, flip that over, and again trim, leaving approximately 1/4 inch. We're now on to the third one to stitch on, which I've already done. So as before, just fold that over. And trim. And there's the fourth one. Next, we're going to make the half square triangles, and we're going to use the 8 at a time method. So you will need D2 and B3. On the top of B3, I've drawn 2 diagonal lines, and we're going to place that right sides together with D2, and then to keep this still and steady while you're sewing, you could pop some pins just around here, just around the outside, or you could clip it if you want to, and then that will just stop it from moving when you're doing your stitching. And then when we take it to the machine, we're going to sew a scant 1/4 inch either side of the 2 diagonal lines. Once you have stitched both sets of lines, we are going to cut the square horizontally and vertically. So taking my ruler and rotary cutter, first of all, I'm just going to pop the ruler so it sits in the center of the block and where the stitching joins, just there. And we'll cut that way. And then we will cut horizontally. So you have then got your 4 squares. Just snip that piece because I don't think I've quite cut it right. There we go. You are then going to cut in between your stitch lines across the diagonal on each piece, and then this will give you 8 half square triangles. Then we're going to press each one open. How to trim your HSTs to the size that you need them to be for your pattern. So first of all, you need to find the 45-degree angle on your ruler, and I'm going to place that along this sewn diagonal line just here. I will measure how wide the square is, and then I know what size I need to cut it down to. So I'm just going to move the ruler slightly so as I can get a more or less even cut on both sides, because I'm going to cut the right hand side first, turn it around, and then do the opposite side. So I will turn it around, finding the 45-degree angle again on my ruler, and then I'm going to place the diagonal line along where the fabric meets and place the left hand marking on the ruler against this left hand cut piece of the fabric. Then moving around to do the opposite two sides. So again, move that around, find the 45-degree angle on your ruler, place that along the centre and trim an amount off the right hand side. And again, turn it around, 45-degree angle, this left hand side against, for the size of the square, against the left hand side of the fabric, and then trim the excess off. And then you will have a perfectly formed half square triangle. We're now ready to sew together the centre of our block. So you'll need B2, C2 and your 8 half square triangles. I'm going to lay my little blocks out first of all for all 4, because we've got 4 of these little corner blocks to do. The reason being is because I'm using a one-way fabric, so I'm going to want to have a look and see which way they would sit best when I sew them together. So you're going to have one in the top right hand corner and one in the bottom left hand corner. So at the moment I've got one going across the horizontal and one going on the vertical. So I am going to have a look at them and see if I like that, or I could change it. And we should have another one somewhere. There we go. So that's another one where the pattern is going horizontal. So I could leave it like that. I think I will for the moment. So I will want one piece of B2 to go there and a piece of C2 to go in the bottom right hand corner. So that will be one corner unit. Then I will do another one. So we've got that one, and then we'll do it that around the other way. So we've got that one, then that one, and then C2 in the corner. So I'm going to put all my little pieces of fabric together for each of the 4 corner pieces for the centre of the block, and I'm going to sew them together in half. So I will sew those 2 together and those 2 together, and then I'll sew that piece to that piece. So that will make one of the quarter blocks that are in the centre of the full block. We're now going to piece the centre of the block together. So you're going to need your 2 pieces of A3 and your 1 piece of A2. So these 2 little units will be stitched together with this A3 in between, and the same for the other side. And then once they're stitched together, you'll stitch one side onto the left hand side of A2 and then the other part of the centre of the block onto the right hand side of A2, and then that will complete the centre. So once I've stitched all those together, we'll come back and have a look, and then we will be ready to put the Flying Geese blocks together. Once the centre of the block has been completed, we can pop that to one side. We're now ready to stitch the outer section of the block. So we have laid out our flying geese with our 2 corner units. So this set will go at the top of the block and this set will go at the bottom of the block. And then these 2 sets of 5 will be attached to either side of the centre of the block to complete that row. So then we'll in effect have 3 separate rows to stitch together. So I'm going to make a start at stitching all these, and then we'll come back and we'll just lay it out on the mat just to see where everything goes before we make the final block. There are the 3 rows completed, so it's just now ready to all be stitched together. And the finished size of your block will be 14 inches square. And there is your finished block. And there is your second finished block. So we have 2 blocks with the flying geese. So we're now going to move on to the third block, which is the star block. The next block we're going to do is the star block. The centre of this block is foundation paper pieced. So you should have the pattern in front of you, and we're just going to cut out the 2 pieces, just leaving a bit of an extra margin around the outside. This will just enable us to make sure that the fabrics that we're using are going to be covering the shapes. So I'm just going to cut those out first of all. So I have both of my shapes cut out, ready. I have a glue stick, some scissors, a piece of template plastic I use, or you could use some stiff cardboard. This is to fold back the paper when you are stitching. And then I've got some scraps of fabric that I'm using for the centre of this block that we're doing. So this is for the star, the piece in the middle. So first of all, we're going to do A1. So we'll just flip that piece over, and that's going to be the dark blue. So taking my dark blue fabric, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put some glue on the back of A1, and I'm going to place this piece of fabric over the top so as it covers, hopefully you can see, the lines that are just here. So this line here, and then what you want to do is cover where the seam allowance is on those 3 sides. So allowing that little bit of extra paper when you've cut your shape out will help you to make sure that you've actually covered all of those lines there. So first of all, just pop a bit of glue on the back of that one, and then I'm going to pop my fabric. So I'm also going to pop it on so as I have got a 1/4 inch seam allowance at least left as an overlap on that line, on this line just here. So I'll pop that on like so, and then we will flip it over. So there are 2 different methods of doing the foundation paper piecing. If you want to, you can lay your plastic or your card on top of that line, fold that piece back, pop your next bit of fabric, which in this case will be the white. So we will just check to see if this piece of fabric is going to cover. So again, we need to allow for a 1/4 inch seam allowance on this side, and to make sure that these 2 lines are covered here. So we place that piece on. I think I'm going to use a piece that's slightly bigger just to make sure that it is actually covered. So we'll use that piece. That's plenty big enough. And then you would place the two pieces right sides together. So what you would do is you would stitch past the point of where the fabric meets, just here, into the seam allowance on both sides, and then you will trim your excess fabric away down to approximately 1/4 inch seam allowance. So that's one way of doing it. The other way of doing it, which I think is a much preferred way by a lot of people who do FPP, and that is to stitch straight on the top of the paper. So again, you would start a little bit in from the where the lines meet, and back stitch and then stitch, and then again into this seam allowance and back stitch again. And then you can still cut away your excess fabric, and then you're ready to fold it open. So and we'll have a look at that once I've stitched it. So I'm going to use the method of stitching through the paper. So I've got an old needle in my machine. That doesn't really matter if it's going through some paper, and I'm going to use a stitch length of 1.5. The reason for doing such a small stitch length is when you come to remove the paper at the end, it will be a lot easier for you just to tear it away. Okay, so let's get sewing. So I have my first two pieces of fabric stitched together on the back of the paper. So that was A1. So before I do anything else, I'm just going to trim the seam allowance. So I'll just fold that piece back, and we'll just cut that down a little bit. Just prevents too much bulk. And then the other thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to cut around this shape, the first one, which is A1, just to trim the rest of the fabric off, and then you've got the rest of the fabric to use for more FPP. So we'll just fold that back. I'll just give that a bit of a trim. And again, with having that small margin of paper, just gives you a little bit more security for where you need to trim to make sure that everything is covered. So then we'll turn it over, and you can see that the white piece is there, has been stitched on. So we'll just give that a bit of a press. And then we'll be ready to stitch on another piece of blue for A3. Now I don't really want all this bulk here either, so I'm going to leave these two edges where they are, but I'm going to trim the fabric underneath with approximately 1/4 inch seam allowance left, just so as we can get rid of some of this excess fabric. So there we have a piece of excess fabric left over there, so as we can, it's there to do the next lot of stitching. So the next piece we're going to do is A3, which is the blue again. So I'm just going to have a look at the piece of fabric that I just cut off to see if I could use this. So again, we want to make sure that everything is covered where the seam allowances are. I think this is going to be too small actually. Yes, it is going to be too small. So we'll pop that piece aside, and I've got another piece just here. So again, matching these two edges of fabric, and then we are going to stitch along this line using the 1.5 stitch length. To trim around the shape, I have got a rotary cutter that has an old blade in it, because we're going to be cutting through the paper and the fabric, so that should cut through both of those. And I've got my quilting ruler. So cutting on this dotted line here, because that's where your seam allowance ends, and you're going to need that piece obviously to sew your bits together. So we'll just take the ruler and I'm just going to cut around the shape. Now when you come to this bit here, because this is where it butts up to other shapes, you will need to cut it as that corner is. Don't cut it off straight or at a point. And there we have the first half of our FPP, which goes into the centre of our star block. So I'm going to do the next half of this, and then we'll come back and we'll look at how we're going to sew them together. Once you've pulled all the papers off, then we'll be ready to stitch the two pieces together. So I'll just pull that final piece away. If you've got any little bits of paper stuck, either use your nails or some tweezers just to pull that off. So that's the two pieces that we're going to sew together. So then, placing the two pieces right sides together, we're now going to stitch a 1/4 inch seam allowance along here where the two pieces meet. There is our FPP finished. That's going to be the centre of our block. So just move that to one side for the moment. Next, we're going to concentrate on the 1/4 square triangles. So taking D1, A3 and C1. So on the back of A3 and C1, you will need to draw a diagonal line. And then place each one on top of D1, right sides together. And now we're going to stitch a scant 1/4 inch either side of these drawn lines. Once you have got your 4 half square triangles, you need to take one from each pile. So you've got one DA and one DC. And what we're going to do is we're going to place them right sides together, so as the centre seams nest together and fabric D is opposite each other. So that's your fabric D. So we'll turn that over and pop that on the top, so you can see there's your two fabric Ds opposite each other. And then we're just going to nest the seams together, and we'll just pop a clip. Just check that, yeah. Just pop that, a clip in the top and a clip in the bottom, just to keep it all together. And then what you need to do is you need to draw a line diagonally across, and then we're going to stitch a scant 1/4 inch either side. So you're going to be going across this way, and as we've done before, just stitch a scant 1/4 inch. And then we'll do exactly the same with the other two. Once you have finished stitching, we're ready to just cut the two pieces in half. And there we will have 4 quarter square triangles. So we'll just press them open, and as you can see, you have got your 2 dark blue ones opposite each other and your 2 paler ones opposite each other there. The next step is to stitch the quarter square triangles and the centre FPP unit together with B1. So this is the layout for that part of the block, and I'm going to stitch it in rows. So I'm going to stitch this 3 together, then those, and then stitch all 3 rows together for the centre. Once you finish stitching all of your rows together, we're then going to add A1 and A2 to the outsides. So starting with A1 first of all, so we'll be stitching that one onto this side, and then this piece to the opposite side, and then A2 will go onto the other 2 sides. Once you've stitched all the 4 borders on, we're going to trim each of the corners so as it's just 1/4 inch from the point of the corner to the outside. So find the 45-degree line on your ruler and just pop the point in at the 1/4 inch mark in from the edge of your ruler into that corner. And then we're just going to trim that end off. To complete the block, we're going to add fabric C2 to each of these straight edges just here. So first of all, we're going to cut them in half along the diagonal. So I've got my 2 pieces together. And then I'm going to pop it right sides together. First of all, we do need to find the centre point. So just fold it in half and put a crease down the middle. So I folded mine right sides together. And then I'm also going to fold this in half so as I can put this crease against the middle of the block. So we'll just finger crease that there, unfold it, and then I'm going to place this piece right sides together where that crease meets the top piece. Just pop a couple of pins in, and then I'm going to stitch a 1/4 inch seam allowance along this side. There is my 3rd block finished, and you just need to trim off the little ears that are on the corners. I've done 3 sides, so I'll just trim those off just to neaten it up. And then if you're going to make it into a table runner, you need to decide whether you're going to just attach the blocks all together or whether you're going to put some sashing in between, which will make it a little bit longer. I'm not going to put sashing with mine. I'm just going to stitch the 3 blocks together in a row. So I have got one of the Flying Geese blocks. So this one is going to be in the middle, and I'm going to stitch the 2 Flying Geese either side. Once I've done that, I will then measure all the way around to see how much binding I'm going to need. But before I do that, I want to measure the blocks to see what size they have come out, and I need them to be all the same size. So once I've measured them, I may have to trim them slightly to get them to the size where they're all equal. Layer your backing, batting and table runner top together into a quilt sandwich. Baste spray or pin ready to quilt. So I have completed the quilting on my table runner, and I used sulky sewing thread on the top, which is a number 40 in white, and I used a blue on the back of the table runner. So I'll just give you a little bit of a close-up. Hopefully it won't get too distorted when I lift it. Hopefully you can see where I've quilted. Just did round the square and oblong shapes really. Felt that was the easiest way to do it. So it's all trimmed as well, ready to have the binding put on. So I've already made my binding, which is here, and as you can see, it's multicoloured. The reason for that is I used fat quarters to cut out all of my pieces. So I had excess fabric from some of the fat quarters, and I decided to make a scrappy binding out of it to use on my table runner. So I'm going to go ahead and put my binding on. If you want to see the method that I use for binding, you can find a video for it on my YouTube channel. Okay, so we'll come back then and have a look at the finished project.